great to be surrounded, finally, by people who know and love Cleve. You know, when I met Cleve in 1969 in his pottery studio in Staten Island, I never imagined that we would bond, much less stay together for 50 years. So I took his pottery class, and eventually we dated, and the journey began. You know, years ago, after someone else's memorial service, Cleve told me that he didn't ever want me to do a memorial service for him. And he told me he'd come back and haunt me if I did. Well, Cleve, bring it on. I hope you do, because I miss you. So who was Cleve? Well, I may be biased, but I think he was a national treasure. So he was creative, we all know that, but he didn't call himself an artist. He was spiritual, he was kind, generous. If you needed something done or built or torn down or fixed, if you needed a hug, whatever you needed, if he could do it with his tools and his big hands, he would do it. And you know, 40 years ago, a child told her mom when she saw Cleve's workshop, she said, "Mom, I learned today that people can make anything out of clay." And then she saw our house in Staten Island, and she said, "Mom, today I learned that Cleve can make anything out of anything." It was true. So Cleve had a passion for social justice. He fought racism and inequality wherever he found it. He didn't think he would live to see a black president, so it was an especially joyous day for us to be in DC and witness the inauguration of Barack Obama. And you know, Cleve's in good company. Within months of his passing, several civil rights icons also passed. There was Elijah Cummings, John Lewis, and Joseph Lowery. So they're all out there hanging out together. Cleve was always a people magnet. The tiny house we lived in Staten Island was really a social hub. He would make quiche and soup, and then he would invite everyone we knew, and we'd sit at this long wooden table he made next to a wood stove that he had welded, and it would all raise glass. And we had a golden lab named Schroeder, and he loved that dog. And when Schroeder died, Cleve never wanted another dog, so we never got another dog. Then good friends helped Cleve build a beautiful house from scrap materials on land we had purchased in Pennsylvania. And our original plan was to move there and sort of live off the land. But instead, I became a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa. And we were separated for 2 years because I was in the Peace Corps, but he wrote to me every single day. And we moved to Senegal, then we moved to DC, and friends helped us take a fixer-upper house in DC and make it into a home we enjoyed for 25 years. In our life together, Cleve encouraged me to follow my dreams, and I did the same for him. We supported each other, we never stood in each other's way, and that's part of what kept us together. A friend just emailed me from Switzerland that she always admired the balance of soloness and togetherness in our partnership. Cleve loved living in other countries, where sometimes he communicated even without a common language. He was actually arrested twice in Africa just for using his camera. Once for taking a photo in Zaire of a street sign, and once for taking a photo of a factory in Senegal because they thought he was a spy. And somehow, he always charmed his way out of going to jail. The African country we lived in longest was Senegal, where Cleve exhibited his art at the National Museum. You should have seen him driving around Dakar in his little Peugeot, which is a funny French car that's smaller than a VW Beetle. And you know, in Senegal, when an older person dies, they say a library is burned. Well, Cleve made sure his library survived because he put his thoughts in writing. And I'm sure each of you has books or letters that he wrote, something that he wrote. So we traveled a lot together in Europe, South America, many African countries, the Caribbean, Japan. And he also did solo trips to Armenia, Mexico, and Sri Lanka. And then in 2008, he made the Hajj, which is a trip to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. And the experience so moved him, that was in 2008, he was still talking about it in his last week on earth. He was talking about it. In 2015, Cleve said he couldn't take another winter. So we moved to Florida, where he loved the birds, lizards, palm trees, manatees, flowers. He worked in our sunroom on 10 collages, which he said would be his last artworks. He listened to music and audiobooks, read the New York Times, wrote letters, and published his last book. He was so thrilled when the printer invited us to watch the printing presses printing out his book and the covers. It was really exciting. We had fresh fish dinners next to the Gulf of Mexico. He rode his bicycle, even at age 90, to the diner for breakfast, where he discussed politics with the owner. We enjoyed visits by friends and Cleve's daughters. He caught up with folks he hadn't seen in years, and he bravely had his knee replaced at age 90. The surgeon told him to come back when he was 100. If only. We enjoyed plays, concerts, museums, art galleries, and we traveled some, fulfilling his bucket list wish to see Cuba and the civil rights memorials in Alabama. What helps me cope with losing Cleve is gratitude. I'm truly grateful for our 50 years together. I'm grateful that Cleve's last years were full of warmth and sunshine and love, that he was with me at home in the end, that he still had his mind and his mobility. I'm grateful he left quickly, as I'm sure most of us want to do, but I sure wish he stuck around a little longer. I'm glad and grateful that he enjoyed so many of you good friends, that he touched so many lives, and that he was able to run with whatever artistic inspiration he felt. And he literally had his say. I'm also grateful for Cleve's two daughters, Valerie and Leslie. As women, as parents and grandparents, as human beings, they're the best. They're true friends, and I'm blessed and honored to have them in my life. And I'm proud that they and their children seem to have inherited Cleve's artistic genes. Truly thank you all for coming today. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I'm Cleve's oldest daughter, and when I thought about what to say, I just saw images. So I want to describe my images, which is fitting for the person he was. My first image that came to mind was our first family vacation. We went to the New Jersey shore, ran into the ocean, quickly got overwhelmed by the waves, started choking and panicked, and all of a sudden these huge arms scooped me up, brought me to safety. That strength carried him through his whole life. He built houses with that strength. He rode a bicycle when he was 90 with that strength, and it was one of the amazing qualities that he had. I remember in 1963, we all went to that famous March on Washington, and the I Had a Dream speech, and it was the first time I was old enough to understand where his lifelong pain and passion for social justice, racial equality came from. I will never forget that time, and I was grateful to be there with him because that was so much of what he was. I have images of his many workshops, pottery workshops, artistic endeavors, saving African masks, collages, paintings. He was capable of seeing the most beautiful things in life and the ugliness in life, and he was able to produce works of art that showed all of that, that showed his belief in what could be and what was. I have images of the books he wrote, with help from people in this room. And those books were a window on his past life, his life at the time he wrote them, and a future that he hoped we might see. I have images of Cleve and Jude all over the world and all over the country. And I can honestly say that Jude is the most important person that ever came into his life. Jude has been the most supportive, loving, giving person that he ever met. We feel he was incredibly lucky to meet you, and he knew it, and he knew it. And she is and was incredibly patient with him. So we are very grateful to continue to have you in our lives. Couldn't ask for a more special, important person to continue a relationship with. And we do really appreciate that his very last moments were spent with the true love of his life. So we're so grateful for that. And finally, probably the most moving image we'll have is everybody in this room. Just looking at how many people he touched throughout the world, throughout the country, through every endeavor he pursued, you were all there with him. And he was enriched by your presence, and I believe you enriched his presence. And we're just grateful that you're all here.
So I don't have anything written down, so I hope I don't look. So I thought about, and nobody said his middle name. So Clarence Allen. Oh no, because you didn't like this to say, but Clarence Allen Cleve Overton. I thought if that were in the dictionary, what would be the word next to it? And it would be activist. But not like most of us think of an activist. He was an activist long before it was a popular word. He protested, he picketed, he had his boycott. Do you remember boycotting? 5 years old and he had his boycotting school. Thank you. Anyway, he wrote letters. Later on, he wrote emails. He wrote books. He created art. Everything he did was intentional. Every conversation he had was intentional. And people have asked me, what was his legacy? He'll laugh at this. The first legacy I think of is, I literally have the largest hands of any female I have ever met in my life. Okay. And she just said, and feet. I was going to leave that out because now what's going to happen is everybody right now is looking at my feet. All right. But he taught me to not care. It doesn't matter you have to wear boys' shoes when everyone's wearing these pretty little things. It's all right, I'm going to move on. Anyway, and that is a legacy. It sounds funny, but try getting pretty little ladies' gloves and knowing that my hands are from my dad. Some of you in here, you know my mom. She's 5 feet tall. So it really is a legacy from him. But really, the biggest legacy I have is that when he spoke, he wanted to make sure he left you with something. Something different, something unique, something that made him angry, something that you should know. Every conversation, I don't think it was planned, I think it was in his DNA. And so because of that, I just want to tell a very little story because I want to honor him with being intentional. So on April 29th of 2020, I called up Dad, and he was sleeping. And I said, all right, well, we're going to send a Zoom later. And we were going to Zoom at 7 p.m. on April 29th, 2020. And I work at a school. You all know what April was like of 2020. I was home doing, I see some nods. I was home doing remote teaching. And this voice came in my head, no, you have to send him something now. I have a class I have to do. No, and I'm not one of these, I don't get voices in my head. I'm crazy, but that's not one of the symptoms, no voices in my head. So I got this and I thought, well, I've got 10 minutes before my next class. I'm gonna make a little video, a 1-minute video. And I knew in the video I had to say something funny. As you can tell, I just have to, even if you if you're very sad, don't invite me to your funeral. And one of the things I did was, I told him how I had just taken a month-long pottery class. Now, some of you know how artistic my dad was. You said that no, I don't have that cane. Okay, all right. I cut up paper and I glue it down. Anyway, so I had taken a pottery class, the kind with the wheel, and I'm sure we have some potters in this room right now. I'm not one of them. And so I held up what I made. Now I'm thinking you're all gonna want this now, because you're like, this is really, Cleve's daughter made this. This was supposed to be a large ice cream bowl. And this won't even hold 1 scoop of ice cream. So in the video I showed him, you remember? I held this up and I said, look, Daddy. And then the next thing I said to him was, as soon as this COVID thing is over, we're gonna get a nice, juicy steak. That was the second thing I made sure to tell him. And the third thing I said was, Daddy, I love you. And I had to end the video. And I sent it to Jude. And she showed it to him. You got back to me and he said, you made him laugh. And he says he loves you. And we were supposed to Zoom at 7 p.m. that night. And at 6:30 on April 29th, 2020, 7 hours after I sent that video, we got a call, he passed away. We never had that Zoom call. And this is why I'm sharing that story, because everything he did was intentional. And I am telling all of you right now, there is somebody that you're supposed to call, or you're supposed to text, or you're supposed to send a call to, or a card to somebody, and let them know that you love them. Because I have a smile on my face. He knew that I loved him, and I made him laugh. Because that little voice said, do it now. Do it now. So I'm telling all of you, because this is what he would want me to do. Don't tell a story unless there's a point. There's a point to this story. Tell somebody that you love how much you care about them. I'm done.
Tough act to follow. We invite you all now to help yourselves to some food, and then after a while, we're going to invite some friends and relatives who'd like to share some memories and stories about Cleve.